What's up, everyone? Welcome to part 2 of my Smite Magic the Gathering card videos. This is also probably going to be the nerdiest video you watch today, and that's because I've combined two very nerdy things, Smite and Magic the Gathering. If you're a fan of one of those, that's great. If you're a fan of both of those, you're probably going to love this video because what I've done is I've taken the gods of Smite and I've turned them into magic cards. Now, I did part 1 about a week ago. I think I uploaded it last week. And since then I've made I think 17 new cards, so I figured I'd share those with you just to go through my thought process as to how to turn some of my gods into magic cards. I've tried to do this pretty seriously, so I want to make sure that the abilities on the cards make sense as far as the theme goes in Smite, and I wanted to come up with some interesting things just to have fun with it. It's fun for me to do stuff like this, even though it's really random and whatever. So again, I think I have about 17 cards I'll go through that are new. That also includes edits that I've made. I've nerfed a lot of the cards I talked about in the last video. So if you would like to watch that first, just to see where some of these cards started and what nerfs that I've given to them, because I did change a couple, I think 5 or 6 of them. So if you want to see the differences, you can definitely do that. I'll start off with Kronos. So Kronos was the first new card that I made for this video, and I like him a lot. He's pretty cool. I like his abilities. So he's expensive. He costs 7 mana. He's a blue and white character. That makes sense because blue a lot of the times has to do with illusion and control. Blue is a very high control color, so you'll see a lot of, returning creatures to their hands, kind of delaying the other player. That's what blue does a lot. And then white is really an aggro color, a lot of defense. So I figured it'd be cool to kind of mix Kronos with those two colors. So his abilities are you can pay 5 mana and return Kronos to your hand. And the reason you would do that is because of the second ability, which says when Kronos, Keeper of Time, enters the battlefield, you get to draw a card. If that card is an island, you gain an extra turn. Now this is a pretty insane mechanic. By reading that, you may think it's broken. This is a mechanic that does exist in other cards. It's usually reserved for either rares or mythic rares because it's very strong. Obviously, if you have an extra turn, you get to untap all of your creatures, play extra spells. It's just another turn, so it's pretty insane. The caveat for this ability is that Kronos is very expensive. You have to spend 7 mana to summon him. So every turn, if you return Kronos, if you pay that 5 mana to return him to your hand, you then have to pay 7 mana to use them again. So this is a very late game card unless you have a mana ramp deck, which is not very common in blue-white decks. So it's first going to be very difficult to do mana ramping with these colors, and you're going to have to wait till late game anyways to play this card. Not only that, every time that you summon him, you can only summon him once a turn, really. You still have a chance that the card that you draw won't be an island. So it's not, super easy to get that extra turn, but if it does happen, it's going to be very cool. And so it's a risky card, but I think it's pretty fun. And we will go back and look at the other cards. So that was the first one. Again, the other video I talked about these cards and some others. So we'll keep going forward. Sylvanas is the next one. Sylvanas is my favorite god in Smite, so of course I had to make an awesome card for him. Sylvanas, you have to pay 7 mana once again, so he's very, very expensive, but he does have Hexproof, Trample, and Reach. Hexproof means that you can't be targeted by spells or abilities. Trample means that if you attack and a creature blocks you, but they don't block all of your damage, whatever damage they don't block still goes through and hits the player. So, again, if you don't know Magic very well, when you attack as a creature, you are always attacking the player. The enemy player who is getting attacked can then use a creature to block if they want to, and usually whenever they block, none of the damage goes through, but with Trample, any extra damage that is not blocked goes through to the player anyways. So that's a pretty strong ability. The third one is Reach. Reach means that Sylvanas can block creatures with flying, but he himself does not have flying. And then the second part of the card is that when Sylvanas comes into the battlefield, you choose a land. That land becomes an XX tree folk creature, where X is the number of green creatures that you control. It is still a land. Now this is an ability that's similar to another card Um, I think it's called the Awakener Druid, I think, and it's very similar. So if you have 10 green creatures on the battlefield, that means you get to summon a 10/10 tree folk creature. But you can still use that as a land. So you can tap that creature at the beginning of your turn, use it for mana if you want to, or you can save it and then attack with it. So pretty cool thing. Of course, when Sylvanas dies, the card goes back to just being a normal land. Not only that, but Sylvanas is also a 5/6. So this is a pretty strong card. It's expensive, but green is actually the color you want to use for mana ramping. And mana ramping is basically getting a lot of mana early with different abilities. There are some cards that allow you to get extra mana in your mana pool, and you can, if you get more mana right away, that means you can pay for these big cards because green does have a lot of big creatures, so you don't have to wait like, 10 turns to get that much mana. You can get it pretty early if you do it right. So that's Sylvanas, pretty fun. Um, Next is Xbalanque. So Xbalanque is a card I had in part 1, but I reworked him. So in the original card, I had him have the ability Infect, which means that whenever he attacks, instead of, let's say he doesn't kill a creature, but what he'll do is when he does damage, the damage will be permanent. So it'll do -1/-1 counters, which means that that creature will never regenerate. The next turn that that player has, the creature will just permanently have, if he has 4 attack, Xbalanque has 4 attack, that creature will permanently have -4. Um, so that's the ability I used to have. I got rid of it. Now he just has Death Touch, which means that any creature he attacks will die automatically. Doesn't matter how strong they are, it will always kill them. And he also has Shroud. If you've played Hearthstone before, and I mentioned this in my part 1 video, um, if you played Hearthstone, there's Stealth. Shroud is basically the same thing. You can't be targeted by spells or abilities, so he's basically hidden, and he's a 4/2, and he only costs 2 mana. So this is a really fun card, good aggro card for a green-black deck, very strong. I do notice that he is, if you look at in the middle of the card on the right, that symbol is black. It should be orange because he is a mythic rare. So I'm gonna have to edit that, but that's okay. Xbalanque, another one of my favorite gods. Really fun, simple card. Um, Next is Zeus. So Zeus, before I had him being really fun, super overpowered. I've changed him quite a bit. So he costs the same mana as before, same unblockable, indestructible vigilance. Even though those stats are really strong, it's warranted with the mana cost. Before I had it, the second ability, deal 3 damage to each creature your opponents control. If a creature is destroyed by this ability, exile it. Before, that just cost 3 white mana. I changed it to be 2 colorless, 1 white, and now you have to tap Zeus, which means you can only do it once a turn. Once Zeus is tapped, you can't untap him in your turn. You have to wait until your next upkeep. So that means he can only activate that once a turn. That's a lot better than I had it before. Before, if you had like 9 white mana, you could activate it 3 times, which is broken. And then I also nerfed his power and toughness. He was an 8/8 before, now he's a 6/6. So still a very strong card, but not as strong as he was before. I thought that was needed. I also had a friend of mine, Mr. Photon, who watched the video, and we had like a pretty good conversation about it. And we went over a lot of the cards, and he gave me some good advice too. So shout outs to Mr. Photon for that. That he was the main reason I nerfed Zeus, because Zeus definitely needed to be nerfed. Poseidon was also nerfed. I had him in the last video. Um, Before it was the same thing. The second ability, you could put a 7/7 blue Kraken creature onto the battlefield with haste. And it only lasts 1 turn. Before, I didn't have the tap, so again, he can only summon 1 Kraken per turn now. And that's the only change I made to Poseidon. Vulcan is another one that I did a small change to. Before, I had this summon a 2/1 turret artifact. It cost 1 red mana, now it costs 2. So that means you won't be able to summon as many because it's a little bit more expensive. And I think that's the only thing I changed on Vulcan. Um, Khepri, I also changed. Uh, Pretty sure the only thing I changed on him was that he used to have to spend 2 and now he has to spend 3, which means you can pay less mana, just 2 white mana to cast him, but you have to wait 3 turns before you get to cast him. I'm pretty sure that's the only change I made. On Khepri, Jingwei, I'm pretty sure the only thing I changed on Jingwei was her power toughness. It used to be like 5-3, but because she only cost 2 mana, that was too high, so I made her 3-2 instead. So she's still very strong, really good abilities, but just not as much power and toughness. All right, now we have some more new gods. I talked about Kronos already and Sylvanas. Now we have Bellona. Now Bellona is actually, pretty good. She's strong, but I don't think she's the best card I made. But I really like her card anyways. So she's very cheap. She's a red-white. Now, if there are red-white cards in Magic, that normally means they're going to be super aggressive aggro cards. Just aggro, aggro, aggro. White and red are two very aggro colors. White is usually a lot of small creatures, whereas red is just like damage, just early damage. Just get it out there, kill them as soon as possible. So Bellona is a mix between those. So she only costs 2. She has haste, which means that she doesn't have summoning sickness. Her ability is Outlast. It's really not that strong of an ability, but I still like it. You can pay 1 red, and you have to tap her, which means you can only do it once per turn, and you get to put a +1/+1 counter on her. You can only use it as a sorcery, which means that you can only use it on certain parts of your turn. You cannot use it in combat. You have to use it there's certain parts of your turn that you can use. I won't go into specifics. Um, and also, her last ability is that each creature you control that has a +1/+1 counter on it has first strike, and it has, if you tap that creature, it gets to deal 1 damage to target creature. Now, first strike basically means that as a creature, you do your damage first, which means that if you're being blocked by a creature that has equal toughness, you will kill them before they kill you. So let's say you're a 1/1 and you attack another 1/1. You get to deal your damage first, which means that they die before they get to deal damage to you. So it's just like a small advantage if you're playing against creatures that have the same toughness as you. The second ability is a really good way to ensure damage. So if you attack with a creature, there's a likelihood that it'll get blocked. But with this ability, you get to just deal 1 damage automatically. You cannot block that damage. So that's a pretty good, 2 buffs to creatures. And she's also a 3/3. So pretty fun card, very good aggro card, but I wouldn't say broken, like, by any means. Um, Medusa is fun as well. She is a green-black. I probably could have just made her a black creature, but I figured I'd add the green in there anyways, just because. She has Death Touch, of course, which means that any creature she attacks dies automatically, doesn't matter what their toughness is. Um, and then her ability is you get to pay X mana and a green and a black, and you get to tap X target creatures. They do not untap during their controller's next untap phase. So X is a variable, obviously, so you can pay as much mana as you want, and each mana that you pay will equal 1 creature. So if I pay 10 mana, I get to tap 10 enemy target creatures, and then on that opponent's next turn, they do not untap. So they have to wait a full turn before they can come back into play. So it's pretty strong. Can be expensive, but in her card isn't. She only costs 3 mana total, so she's pretty strong. I like her a lot. I would definitely use this in a green-black deck. And the thing about Magic is there are other Gorgons in Magic, so you could definitely use that. That theme of Gorgons with Medusa. So you see this card. This is actually a different thing. So this has nothing to do with Smite at all. I've just made a different deck. Um, I guess I'll talk about this after. We'll get out. I'll talk about these cards because I did make a few cards that are supposed to just be Magic cards, and I have like my own special deck that I'm making. So that's pretty fun. So we'll go on to the next page. I think these all should be new. All these cards. Yep, these are all new. So these cards are part of that deck that I was just talking about. I'll talk about them after. Next is On Her for Smite. On Her is pretty fun. Costs 4 mana, has Menace, which means that he can only be blocked by two or more creatures. So that's pretty strong. That's pretty much guaranteeing damage, especially since he's a red creature, which means getting damage out there as soon as possible. And then if he is blocked, you get to choose a target creature and deal 2 damage automatically to them. So nice little buff. Kind of makes sense. He's really a ramped up, aggressive creature. So very cool. 5/4, very strong. Not the best card I've made by far, but still really fun. Kind of simple too, which makes sense since Honor has a simple kit in Smite. You know, Arachne is very fun. I really like the connection to her kit with this card. So she has Death Touch. She costs 3 mana, 3/3, and her ability is that each time that she deals damage to a creature or a player, you get to summon a 1/1 spider token that has Death Touch. So that's really strong because, like as I said, Death Touch means that it doesn't matter what the other creature's toughness is, you kill them automatically. So let's say you're playing against a green deck and they have a 20/20 creature out there. You can summon this 1/1 hatchling. You have to wait a turn because it doesn't have haste, but next turn you can block that 20/20 with a 1/1 and kill it. It's just dead. So pretty awesome. And then each time a spider token deals damage to a player, you can summon another spider token. So this is just, you're summoning a bunch of spiders. It's kind of like over time it'll just grow and grow, and by the time, you might have like 20 spiders by the time you're over, especially if you cast this before. Let's say you're playing against a green deck and they're waiting till the end game to play these big creatures. You can just get those spiders out there and end the game pretty quickly. So it's kind of an aggro card in that way. So she's pretty fun. Amir is also really cool. I'm just complimenting my own cards. I don't know. This is, like I said, this is fun for me. I enjoy doing this nerdy stuff like this. Um, so he is a 8/9, which is ridiculous, but he costs 8 mana. Now, 8 mana is way too much to cast any card. The reason that it's okay is because he has this ability called Delve, which means that you get to choose any number of cards you want from your graveyard and you can exile them. And each card that you exile will subtract the cost. So, blue deck has a lot of spells, a lot of instant sorceries. A lot of them are super cheap. So if you have a deck with a bunch of like instants and sorceries and you play those, you could, before you get to play Amir, who's going to be a late game card, you could have, let's say, 20 cards in your graveyard. You could just choose 8 of them, and all of a sudden Ymir costs no mana. So it really depends on what kind of deck you make. You would want to team him up with a deck that has a lot of spells so that you can exile them out of your graveyard. His ability is when he enters the battlefield, you get to transform one of your lands into a 0/15 wall token. And creatures that are blocked by this wall do not untap in their next untap phase. So this is that second part is basically the same as the Medusa card. 0/15 wall is very strong. Most walls, the max I've seen, I think was like 10. So very strong wall token. It makes sense because he's a mythic rare to have a really good wall. And again, it's another control card because if you block a really strong creature with that wall, all of a sudden the opponent has to wait an extra turn to play that creature again. So good control, really strong. He's an 8/9, so pretty fun late game card. Thanatos is next. Thanatos had to be awesome. You can't make a Thanatos card in Magic and not make him awesome. So hopefully I've done justice to him with this card. Now he costs 6 mana, three colorless, 3 swamps. He has flying, of course, because and a creature who has flying means that they can only be blocked by other creatures with flying. Or let's say you have a Sylvanas, and Sylvanas has reach, he can block Thanatos as well. So his ability is you get to pay 1 swamp and you have to tap him. Thanatos deals X damage to target creature, where X equals your devotion to black. Excuse me. So devotion was a mechanic that was in the Theros pack, or series of Magic, and what it means is Thanatos has 3 swamps in his mana cost, which means you will automatically have 3 devotion for Thanatos. And the reason that devotion works is you want to have cards with devotion in an all black deck. If you have like a duo mana deck, this won't work as much because you have to have black symbols in order to have a lot of devotion. So let's say you have 5 creatures on the battlefield and they total 9 mana symbols in their, swamp symbols in their mana cost. That means you get to deal 9 damage to a target creature. So that's pretty cool. You could definitely pick card. Let's say there's some black cards that have 2 swamps in them. You would probably want to use those more, just to get more and more devotion. So it's kind of a tricky mechanic to use, but pretty fun. It's really like, because Thanatos is the hand of death, he's super black, really the epitome of a black card, and so it makes sense for him to have devotion. And then he's a 6/4, so it's really strong. You don't even have to activate that ability. You still have a 6/4 creature with flying, which is broken anyways. Um, so hopefully that explanation of devotion made sense. Kind of a tough mechanic to explain, honestly. Terra's next. Terra's broken. I'll just say that right away. She costs 2 green symbols, and she's a mana ramp card. If you play Magic, you know mana ramp is very important to green decks. She is hexproof and defender, which means that she can attack. And you get to tap her and put 3 green force in your mana pool. No other card has this much. If there are cards that have a similar ability, I think the max is maybe 2 greens. So being able to put 3 greens in your mana pool is ridiculous. So let's go back. I guess we can think about Sylvanas. Sylvanas costs 7 mana total. So what you basically do is you're subtracting 3 from that. So all you need is 4 other green mana in order to cast Sylvanas, because you can just tap Terra and gain that extra 3. So it's very strong. Great way to get big creatures on the battlefield. So should she get nerfed? Probably, but I thought it made sense because she's the Earth Mother. To have mana ramp, she is like, Terra means Earth, so why wouldn't you have her be mana ramp? It kind of makes sense. Um, so she's pretty fun. If that was a real card, it'd be used in every green deck probably. Um, so I'll say Mark of the Golden Crow because it goes with Hu Yi. I'll talk about Fenrir next. Fenrir was another card that I had a good. Well, I just texted Mr. Photon about him, and I originally had him as a black green, but then he was like, "Oh no, he's got to be black red." So I agreed with him completely. He's definitely a black red creature, um, and his ability is broken. So he has Devour 3, and that means that as he comes into play, you get to sacrifice any number of creatures. Each creature that you sacrifice, um, can be converted into plus 3 +1/+1 counters on Fenrir. So he's a 5/5. If you just sacrifice 1 creature when Fenrir comes into the battlefield, he becomes an 8/8. You sacrifice 2, he becomes an 11/11. So you can see how this can start to get ridiculous, and it's very broken. Should he be a 3/3? Maybe, but he does cost 5 mana, and he's a mythic rare, and he's Fenrir, so he's the bringer of Ragnarok. I'm not gonna make him weak sauce. Fenrir has to be awesome. So that's why I gave him this ability, and I think it goes very well with Ragnarok. Sacrificing creatures. It just kind of made sense. Hu Yi is next. Hu Yi is pretty fun. This is a new mechanic. I made this up myself. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this in Magic before. So he costs 4 mana, and ignore the first ability. I talked about it after. You really don't need to worry about it like right away. But the second ability is where the meat is of this card. So when Hu Yi enters the battlefield, you get to take that Mark of the Golden Crow card. So I'll go back. So if Hu Yi's in your deck, you're just gonna want to have Mark of the Golden Crow on the side. You don't need to put it in your deck. Just have it there and ready. Um, and so whenever he comes on the battlefield, the mark also comes onto the battlefield. Just remember that. That's the card right there on the right. Um, and when he comes onto the battlefield, you give the mark to a target player. So let's say you're playing with 4 players, you just get to pick one of them and say, "Here, you have the mark," and then that player who has the mark is dealt an additional 1 damage from every source of damage that you control. So let's say you are playing a red deck and you cast a fireball and does 6 damage. Instead, it does 7 damage. If you attack with Hu Yi for 4 damage, instead he does 5 damage. Um, and it only has to be at the player. So it's not like Hu Yi can attack a creature for 5 instead of 4. It has to be the player that takes extra damage. Like this again goes with the theme of red, of ending the game as early as possible. The only caveat again to Hu Yi is that he costs 4 mana, so he's not an early game card, he's like a mid game card. Um, and if Hu Yi is destroyed, the mark gets removed. And then we can go back to the first ability. You can pay 1 red and tap Hu Yi, and you can move the crow to another player if you want, the mark. So let's say you do your damage to one player, they're like 2 health. You can all of a sudden say, oh well, I'm gonna move the mark to this other player because I want to start messing them up. So that ability only works if you're playing multiple players. If you're just 1v1, you don't really play that, but yeah, I think that's pretty fun. Makes sense with Hu Yi's theme in Smite, and I thought it was pretty cool. And then Mark of the Golden Crow is the card that goes with it, and the text on it is basically the same as Hu Yi. It's just kind of acknowledging what I already said. So that's pretty fun. And then I think this is the last card. Yep, Chiron. So I love green-white decks because I love the mixture of big creatures and small creatures. I love having aggro. That's why I play white. I would say these are my 2 favorite colors in general. I love aggro white decks because I love small creatures, but I also love, let's say I have an aggro deck and, it's not working, so we get to like turn 8 or 9 and I'm still not winning with my aggro cards. I can still have those big green creatures as my backup in case I get to the late game. So that's why these colors go very well together, in my opinion. Um, and there's also a theme. So white is kind of like the color paladins, justice, righteousness, very honorable color, whereas green is forest, whatever, creatures, stuff like that. So Chiron made sense to be a green-white to me. He has vigilance. Vigilance is also very key into his theme because he's smart, he's a teacher, he's very vigilant. Um, and he has 3 abilities. So you can pay 2 whites and target creature gains +0/+3 until end of turn. You could also pay 2 green, and then target creature will either gain hexproof, trample, or death touch. So you get to choose one of those. So that's a very good situational card. Let's say you have a big creature and you want to give it trample for a turn. You can do that. Let's say you have a really small creature that you want to use to block. You could give that death touch. And let's say there's a creature that is on the battlefield that you're afraid is going to get destroyed by a red card or a blue card. You can give it hexproof, and then it can't be the target of spells or abilities. And then the last one is you can pay a green, a white, and tap Chiron. You get to draw a card. So that's very strong. Drawing cards is obviously really, really good in Magic. You want to have extra cards. So the only thing is you can only do them once a turn. So that makes sense. So he's very good. Cheap as well. 2 mana. And he's a 3/3. So I think that's a fun card. I like that a lot. So those are the the Smite cards. If you have no interest in the other cards I'm going to talk about, you can end the video now if you want, if you are just a Smite fan. But if you do like Magic, I'll go into this other deck. So I think I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 7 cards. There's another on the second page. So basically I've made a plant and fungus deck, or I'm starting it. Again, I only have 7 cards. But with this deck, it's going to be very focused on like mushrooms that do different things, plant creatures, other plants and stuff that I haven't created yet. And then I have 1 mythic rare that is really key to this deck's success, so I'll talk about that. So I guess we can start with this card. It's called Growing Amanita. It's very simple. It's a common, costs 1 mana, so it's not super strong, but it has this ability which I actually created. I don't think it exists in Magic. It's called Regrowth. And what it is any time that this card is put into a graveyard, you give it a time counter, and then you get to return the card to your hand after all time counters have been removed. So basically, this card gets in your graveyard, the next turn you get it back, automatically. Now, that might seem really strong, but the reason it's not is because its ability is not super great. You tap it, and you get to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So you can only put 1 counter on 1 creature each turn. It's also a 0/1, so you can't attack with it unless you buff it. So, there are a lot of pluses and minuses with this card. The regrowth is really strong because you can just keep summoning it if you want to. It's a good little buff card, but does the regrowth really matter? Is it like super strong? Not really, because the ability is just okay. Um, and I think most of the cards I've created are commons. I'll start making rares and some uncommons as well. Once I start making more cards, I need to come up with some ideas, to be honest. Um, I have two other mushrooms which I've created. This one is called Toxic Hygrophorus, and it's basically the same card except its ability is the opposite. So it has a regrowth 1 again, but you tap it and you give a creature -1/-1. Um, and it's permanent. It's a permanent counter. So it's not like just until end of turn. That creature gets -1/-1 forever. Um, but it's pretty much the same as Growing Amanita, just the opposite. Just -1/-1 instead of +1/+1. Um, this one is very similar as well, but there's some tweaks to it. It is a uncommon, first of all, so it's a little bit stronger. It still costs 1 mana. It's called Festered Skullcap. Oh, by the way, all this art I stole off of Google, of course. Um, this has Regrowth 2, so it's the same ability as the other ones, but instead of returning it after 1 turn, you have to wait 2 turns. So it'll sit in your graveyard, it has 2 time counters, and then on the second turn, you get to return to your hand. And this has a pretty strong ability. You can sacrifice it to destroy a target creature. So pretty good. Actually, it's very good. That's why it's an uncommon, because it's better than the other two. Destroying creatures is very strong. The only thing is, you can destroy one creature, and then you have to wait 2 turns to do it again. And it's also very weak. So let's say it goes on the battlefield, and you're playing a red, they could just deal 1 damage to it. The red creature or something could just deal 1 damage to this card and destroy it. So, and it does have summoning sickness, so you cannot sacrifice it until the next turn. The next card is called Oaken Wanderer. So it's a 1 mana card as well. This is a plant creature. It's a 2/3, which would normally be very strong for a 1 mana card, but it does have a drawback in that it cannot attack or block. And that ability passive, I don't think there's anything in Magic like that. There's text on cards that are similar, but this is an actual like keyword ability. But what you can do is you can just pay 1 mana and then it can attack or block. So the whole point is it's supposed to be like a passive creature that just, again, it's a wanderer, so it just walks around and isn't interested in combat, but if you pay 1 mana, then all of a sudden you can attack with it. So it's very cheap, but it does have a drawback. It costs like an extra mana to get it to attack. Next is Moldering Lycanite, which I love that name. Moldering basically means like something that's rotting or decaying, and then lichen is like a type of fungus. It's not a fungus. It's like a separate thing. Lichen is a separate, like it's not like a plant. It's its own. What is that called? Like genome, I guess. I'm trying to think of the word for it, but it's a 3/1. It's a common, and it's a 3/4. So that's pretty good. But it deals its damage as -1/-1 counters. So if you deal damage to a creature, that creature will permanently have -3, -3. So that's pretty good. The only thing is you know, it's not like the best card in the world. 3/4 is good, but I made it a common because it's really not amazing. I also, this flavor text I wrote myself. The creature reeks so horribly that the worms would burrow deeper as it approached. So that's pretty fun. The next card is a rare, and it is called Mysterious Fruit. So this is another 1 mana. There's a lot of 1 mana green cards in this, so it's going to be an aggro green deck. I thought that made sense because the theme of the deck is plants and fungus. They're not going to be like, why would you pay 7 mana for a mushroom, So that kind of goes with the theme a little bit. So Mysterious Fruit, it's a sorcery, but it's like a plant sorcery. I didn't know how to label it, but it is a sorcery. It's a rare. When you cast it, you get to draw a card. So right away, drawing a card for 1 mana, very strong. Doesn't even matter what the rest of the text says. That's very, very strong right away. Um, but there is extra. So if you draw a plant or a fungus, you get to gain 5 health. If you draw a land, you get to draw 2 extra cards. So already this card is getting broken. Um, I might change it to 1 card. We'll see. But there is a drawback. If you draw any other type of cards, so if you draw a sorcery, an instant, an enchantment, an artifact, oops, sorry. No, don't delete it. So if you draw any other card, you have to discard a card. So this could have some drawbacks, and the reason that this card would be great is if you design your deck around it. So just make sure you don't have too many sorceries, too many instants. The plant deck is going to be made to be a small creature aggro deck, pretty much. So that's why you would want to use this card. And then the last card that I'm going to talk about is the mythic rare of the set, or at least one of the mythic rares. It's called Magus of the Wood. I love this art. I found this, again, Google Images. This card is the one I was talking about at the beginning. It's pretty key to this deck's success. If you don't have this card in your deck, it's going to be not nearly as good. Pretty expensive. It costs 6 mana, but again, if you have mana ramping in this deck, that'll help. Put a Terra in there, that'll be great. So this card is a creature. It's a druid. It's a 5/3. It has hexproof, which means it can't be the target of spells or abilities. And when Magus of the Wood enters the battlefield, return all plants and fungi from your graveyard to the battlefield. If Magus of the Wood is destroyed, place all plants and fungi into your graveyard. So it's basically a dumb card that allows you to get all of your graveyard out there. And again, it's very specific to this deck because if you have, if you don't have any plants or fungi, then you would not want to play this. It's kind of like a game-ending card. Let's say you have, all plants and all fungi. You can have up to, it's, countless amounts of cards on the battlefield at one time. But the key is to make sure the Magus of the Wood does not get destroyed. Now, hexproof will help it, but there are other ways to counter this card. So you have to be careful with it. But yeah, it's pretty fun, cool theme. I definitely like that a lot. So yeah, so that's it. If you made it this far, thank you very much for checking out part 2 of my Smite Magic the Gathering video. I will try to make all gods in the game. Probably will take me a while since I'm doing like 15 at a time. So we'll see how many we do. But yeah, if I have extra time, I do like to make a couple cards here and there. If you're interested in making your own Smite cards, I would first off love to see them. So if you have, if you're interested in this and you want to make some, please share them. I would love to see what you come up with. The site is mtgcardsmith.com. You could just go on there, make a free account, and you can start making them. I can show you how I do it. So create new card. I go to this one because it's easier to set up. You just select your image. Use all my Smite. We'll pick Zeus. Then you have to, of course, size it a certain way. Just select it. Go to edit. And here's how you put in all the information. You get to put the titles. So Zeus, OP, whatever. Casting costs, just pick whatever you want. Here's all the casting, okay? And then you can pick what kind of colors. So if you want it to be white, that's fine. You can also, let's say it's a mix. You can make it do white, whatever, and gold. Or you could just do regular no gold. So he's a white type of card. I put legendary creature because they're all gods. You can do something else if you want. Rarity, I always make a mythic rare because they're gods. They're pretty strong. So whatever. And then you get to pick what series you want. So I usually do Born of the Gods because that just makes sense. And then type, Zeus is OP. Power, 100. Oh, I can't even do that. 50. Oh, I can only go up to 20 apparently. And next, artwork artist, me. I usually put hires there, but I'll do that just because it's funny. And there you go. There's Zeus OP. It's just a ridiculous looking card. So that's how you do it. Very simple. Takes like a minute to do. But you do have to think about what kind of mechanics you want to put in there first. So that's how you do it. If you're interested, please share them with me, the cards that you make. And hopefully I'll make another video soon. So thank you very much for watching. Hope you have a great day.